Midnight is the hour truckers fear the most. The highways get quieter, the sky gets darker, and the things that hide along the shoulder finally step out of the shadows. Tonight, you're going to hear 10 real stories from drivers who were alone on the road when something unexplainable climbed into their mirrors, their radios, and in one case, their sleeper berth. If you enjoy these long, cinematic horror stories, don't forget to subscribe. Almost 80% of viewers watching right now still haven't. Hit that button. It really helps the channel grow. And before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it right now? Alright, settle in, keep your lights low, and whatever you do, don't look in your mirrors. Let's begin.
I've been running long haul long enough to know when something doesn't add up on the road. Name's Cole. I pull nights whenever I can. Less traffic, fewer idiots, more room to think. That particular run was simple on paper. Denver up to Casper on I-25 dry van, 21,000 pounds of machinery parts strapped and sealed, no hazmat, no special routing. I had 7.5 hours left on my 11 when I cleared the north side of Denver. Enough cushion to make my window with a coffee stop if the weather stayed friendly. Didn't. Past Wellington, the sky went from clear to smudged in under an hour. The stars dulled out first like someone dimmed a switch. Then the fog started low, dirty. Not the white hillside stuff you see in postcards. This was the kind that clung to the asphalt and hung just high enough to swallow your low beams. The outside temp on my dash floated around 34, just above freezing, and the road felt damp but not slick. So I stayed on, northbound. Cruise set a hair under the limit, both tanks sitting just over 3/4, no warnings on the dash. CB was dead. That might not sound strange if you don't drive, but at midnight on a major corridor, you usually hear something skip, distant chatter, some guy complaining about dispatch, somebody calling out a bear in the median. Channel 19 was full quiet hash. I clicked the squelch back and forth just to make sure the radio hadn't died. Nothing. Just that soft rushing noise, like wind in a shell. My GPS, old Garmin, wired into the dash. Put the next fuel and food around 14 miles up. No exits between me and there. I knew that stretch well enough to trust it. Northern Colorado isn't exactly bursting with surprises. So when the first sign showed up, my brain lagged a few seconds behind my eyes. The fog parted just enough to catch the reflection. A blue square ahead on the right, glowing under my high beams. I eased off the cruise and rolled a little closer. White block letters slid into view. Exit 49. Services. Arrow right. I frowned before I even finished reading it. There is no exit 49 up there. I-25's exit numbers track the mile markers, and I knew I was already north of 100. The last green board I'd passed said mile 119. You don't just drop 70 miles worth of numbering in the middle of the night. I told myself it was a construction detour I'd missed the memo on. They've been known to shift things around, temporary ramps, new interchanges. The sign itself looked legit enough. Right font, right reflectivity. Even the little lodging, food, fuel icons stenciled along the bottom. If you weren't counting miles, you'd never think twice. The ramp peeled off hard to the right at a sharper angle than normal, diving down into what looked like a solid wall of fog. No streetlights, no sodium glow from gas stations, no exit number painted on the shoulder. Just black beyond the guardrail. Every hair on my arms stood up. Instinct said no. Years on the road have taught me that when something feels off, you don't argue, you just respect it. I feathered back onto the throttle, watched the ramp slide away in my right mirror, and told myself I'd Google it on my 10-hour break. I'd gone maybe a mile, maybe less, when the CB snapped awake. The speaker gave a sharp crackle, like someone slapped the side of the truck, and then a voice bled through. Thin, stretched, like it was coming from way out past the normal range. Eastbound. Don't stop, it loops. Just like that. No call sign, no breaker 19. Nothing. The signal had that distant skip quality, the kind you get on freak atmospheric nights when you're catching some other state's chatter. But there was something else under it, too. A distorted echo, like the words were being dragged across gravel. I grabbed the mic. Northbound on 25, you trying to reach me? Say again, driver. Silence. Then the hash drained back down to nothing. I checked my mirrors, both sides. Empty. I'd seen one set of tail lights drop off and exit 20 minutes earlier, and no one had come up behind me since. My headlights tunneled into the fog, showing clean lane lines, rumble strips, and that glossy wet sheen on the pavement. My odometer ticked forward, steady. No flicker in the dash lights, no flutter in the wheel. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding and leaned closer to the windshield, scanning for the next green mile board just to ground myself. Mile 119 slid by. I stared at it as it flashed in the beams, a little knot tightening in my gut. That was wrong. I should have been past that by now. I told myself I'd misread the earlier sign, that maybe it was 118 or 117 and I was just tired. I've made dumber mistakes with more coffee in me. 2 minutes later, the blue reflected glow cut through the fog again. Same sign, same angle. Exit 49 services. Arrow right. This time, my foot moved to the brake on its own, slowing us from 60 to 45. The ramp was identical, every crack in the pavement, every bolt in the guardrail. I watched the fog swallow the shoulder just beyond the gore point. The Garmin still insisted the next exit was 14 miles away. The little truck icon kept creeping along its purple line like nothing was wrong. I didn't say anything. I just watched the ramp drift past again, stomach rolling like I'd hit turbulence on clear air. I checked my odometer. From the moment I passed the first sign to this one, I'd logged 0.8 miles. Not enough time for an exit that wasn't supposed to exist even once, let alone twice. They talk about highway hypnosis in safety videos, that trance you fall into when you've been staring at the same 4 lines of pavement for too long. This didn't feel like that. My skin felt too tight. My heartbeat was loud against the quiet of the cab. On the third pass, the CB voice came back before I ever saw the sign. Eastbound. Don't take it. They don't let you back. Static ate the last word. I keyed up. Where are you, driver? You on 25. Nothing. Just that hollow noise, more like a breath than a transmission. The sign appeared again, brighter this time, like my beams were closer, even though my speed and timing were nearly the same. Exit 49. Services. The icons at the bottom looked wrong. The bed symbol was tilted, the gas pump crooked, the fork and knife overlapping like they'd melted. The ramp, though, that's what got me, felt closer to the lane. The gore point almost pinched my right tire as I rolled by. I knew then that whatever was happening wasn't in my head. The road itself felt like it was shifting, bending to herd me. I gripped the wheel until my palms ached. You're tired, I muttered to myself. You need to shut down at the next real exit, that's all. The fourth time, I didn't see the sign first. I saw the man. He stood at the top of the ramp right where the merge lane should have met the exit, facing the highway. High-vis vest, reflective stripes catching my lights in dead bands. Hard hat, dark pants, the kind of generic silhouette you see 100 times a year in construction zones. What made me lock up was the flashlight. He held it at waist level, pointing down, and swung it side to side in slow arcs. But the light didn't land anywhere. It didn't hit the guardrail, didn't touch the fog, didn't spill onto his boots. The beam was there, visible, but it just ended, like the air itself was absorbing it. My right hand twitched toward the signal stalk, habit of acknowledging roadside workers. Instead, I tightened my grip and forced my eyes back to the center of my lane. Something in the way he moved, too smooth, too deliberate, like he'd practiced that same gesture 1,000 times, made my throat go dry. As I passed, I couldn't help it. I checked the right mirror. He was closer than he should have been, standing inches off the shoulder line now, still waving that dead flashlight. The vest's reflective stripes glowed, but there was nothing inside them. No face, no hands, just shape. Cut out. I jerked my eyes forward and mashed the throttle like I was climbing a grade. The engine roared, the nose lifted a hair, and the speedometer climbed. I stared at the center line, daring myself not to look at anything else until I saw a real, familiar number. The fog pressed in thicker, turning the world into a narrow tunnel. The cab felt too warm, my breath too loud. The smell of diesel and old coffee mixed with something else now. Wet dirt, like the inside of a freshly dug hole. When the green finally cut through the white, my heart stuttered. Mile 122. Just like that, the fog began to thin. My ears popped, like I'd just driven over a subtle elevation change. The CB hissed back into normal static. A minute later, a southbound reefer blew past in the opposite lane, marker lights bright and ordinary. Garmin cheerfully announced my next suggested stop, like nothing was wrong. I drove another 20 miles before I trusted my hands to pour coffee without shaking. When I finally shut down at a truck stop, I sat there with the engine off, listening to the ticking metal, going back over everything in my head. The odometer numbers, the timing, the repeated exit, the man with the flashlight that didn't light anything. In the morning, after a few hours of broken sleep, I called the Colorado DOT district office, told them I was a driver who'd been up on I-25 near the Wyoming line, and asked if there'd been any overnight construction around exit 49. The woman on the phone was polite, bored. "There's no exit 49 on that stretch, sir. Last one before the borders in the 280s. Maybe a temporary?" I pressed. "New interchange? Detour." She put me on hold. I listened to some thin, cheerful music while my coffee cooled. When she came back, her tone had changed, just a little. "Where did you say you saw that number?" I gave her my best estimate, between mile 119 and 122. Northbound, just after midnight, heavy fog. She went quiet long enough that I thought the call had dropped. "Sir," she said finally, "there hasn't been an exit 49 there for 27 years. That interchange was removed after a major accident. The ramp was graded over and the signs came down in 98. I waited for her to laugh, to tell me it was a mix-up. Instead, she cleared her throat and added, almost like she didn't want to ask, "Did you take it?" "No," I said. "No, ma'am." I kept going. "Good," she murmured, almost to herself. "You have a safe day now." She hung up before I could ask anything else. I've looked up old maps since then. There was an exit 49 once, little county road, small motel, a gas station that doesn't exist anymore. The news archives talk about a pileup in fog, cars following each other off a ramp they couldn't see, trucks jackknife it across both lanes, people who never made it to where they were going. I still run I-25 at night sometimes, still watch the mile markers tick past like a steady heartbeat. But every time the fog comes down and the CB goes quiet a little too long, I find myself staring straight ahead, hands tight on the wheel, refusing to glance right. Because if I ever see that blue sign again, exit 49, services, arrow into nothing, I don't trust myself not to look at the man with the flashlight a second too long. And I don't know what happens to the ones who decide they need fuel that badly. I've always liked running nights on 50. Most guys avoid that stretch across Nevada and Utah if they can. Too empty, too few shoulders, too far between fuel and food. Me, I've run it enough times to know where the gravel pull-offs are, which gas stations keep their pumps on after midnight, and where the troopers like to sit with their lights off. I drive a 2018 Cascadia, pulling a 53-foot dry van, mostly auto parts and palletized freight for a regional outfit out of Salt Lake. Good truck, good brakes, no major electrical gremlins. I don't run junk. That night, I was westbound on US 50, leaving Delta heading toward Ely, about 6 hours into my shift. It was just after midnight. The outside temp sat at 41, wind gusting crosswise hard enough that I could feel the trailer tug my shoulder every few minutes. The sky was pitch, no moon, just a spray of stars you only really see when you're 100 miles from the nearest Walmart. The road was mine. No headlights ahead, no tail lights behind. Just my low beams carving out two pale tunnels on the asphalt, white lines slipping under me, and the steady hum of the tires. I had a faint vibration from the trailer. Nothing crazy, just a little off. Every time a gust hit just right, the tug felt wrong, like the weight wasn't sitting where it should. I checked my gauges. Air pressure holding steady. No warning lights. My last scale ticket back in Delta had me legal on gross and axles. Tandem slid right where they always are for this shipper. But the feeling stuck with me. That tug. That slight sideways pull when the wind pushed from the driver's side. So when I saw the glow of the way station up ahead, One of those little DOT deals tucked off to the right with a single lane and a concrete building. I decided to pull in, even though the closed sign was lit. The exit ramp was short, dropping down off the highway, the rumble strips thrumming under my steers. Sodium lights washed everything in that sick yellow-orange. A bug-smeared sign said, Nevada DOT Port of Entry, closed. Report when flashing. The beacon at the top was dark. The main sign still glowed closed in big red letters. Nobody required me to stop. I just wanted a flat piece of scale I could roll onto, maybe double-check that nothing had shifted, maybe walk the trailer and calm down that little knot in my gut. I idled across the empty apron. Slow. The lot felt off. You get used to the clutter of a working station. Parked pickups, cones, a DOT car backed into the shadows, trash in the corners. This place was clean. Too clean. Like it had been scrubbed and then forgotten. The building was a small concrete block with a big glass front facing the scale lane. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed like angry flies. The scale's digital readout sat in the window where the inspector could see it. 4 red digits. 0 pounds. I lined my drives up with the first platform, eased forward until I knew most of the truck was on steel. You know you're on a scale. You feel it, a hard stillness under the tires. The numbers didn't change. Still 0 pounds. I set the brakes. The deep sigh of the air releasing sounded too loud in the empty lot, and killed my headlights but left the markers on. The world shrank to the soft glow of my dash, the tick of cooling metal, and the buzz of those overhead lights outside. The smell of hot diesel and dust drifted in through the vent. I watched the digital readout for a solid 10 seconds. 0 pounds. You ever see a dead machine still pretending to be alive? That red glow felt like that. I should have chalked it up to an old, disconnected scale. But that tug in the trailer, and the way the wind kept hitting me from the left like it was hurting me somewhere, had me uneasy. I grabbed my flashlight, zipped my jacket, and stepped down into the wind. It hit cold and dry, tugging at my hat, carrying the smell of creosote and old asphalt. Gravel crunched under my boots. The station lights hummed overhead, that high-pitched drone almost like tinnitus. I shut my door but didn't lock it, habit when I'm just walking a quick circle. The scale platform stretched ahead, a long rectangle of steel embedded in concrete. Painted lines faded and scuffed from 1,000 trucks. The wind pushed thin dust in sheets across it. I walked back along the driver's side, checking my straps through the trailer's slats, listening to the familiar creak of suspension and the faint tick of cooling drums. That's when I saw her. She was standing at the far end of the scale platform, just beyond the last painted line. High-vis vest, reflective stripes catching the station lights in sharp white bands. Dark pants, work boots, hard hat, hands at her sides. No car, no pickup, no personal vehicle of any kind. Just her. No movement in the lot. No other sound but the wind dragging at my jacket. Evening, I called, raising my flashlight so she knew I'd seen her. My voice sounded small in that wide concrete bowl. She didn't answer. She lifted one hand slowly, palm toward me. Not a wave, not a stop. More like a signal, a tiny beckon. Come here. I stopped halfway down the trailer, my heartbeat thudding in my ears now. The wind shifted, bringing a different smell. Metal, old rain. Something faintly like rusting blood on steel. Dot. I tried. Station's closed. You need something? She didn't move. Her vest glowed bright, but the rest of her was oddly flat, like the light wasn't catching her face right. I couldn't see her features from that distance, just pale where skin should be. Behind her, through the glass of the booth, the red digital readout flickered. 0 pounds. Then it beeped. It was a sharp electronic chirp I felt in my teeth. The numbers jumped in a clean 4-digit blink. 14,320 pounds. I froze. That's roughly what a loaded tandem set might show, depending on configuration. Too specific to be random. The wind died for half a second. I heard the hum of the lights, the distant whine of my reefer unit, and the faint ticking of my cooling engine. The display dropped back to 0 pounds. Then, a second later, it snapped back to 14,320 pounds. Back and forth. 0 pounds, 14,320 pounds. 0 pounds, 14,320 pounds. Like something heavy was stepping on and off the steel in a rhythm only it understood. The woman on the far end didn't glance back. She just kept that hand half raised, that slow, patient gesture, like she had all the time in the world for me to figure out what she wanted. I took a step back toward my cab. The scale beeped again, longer this time, and the numbers held at 14,320 pounds. The buzz of the fluorescence grew louder, harsh, like they were straining. A gust of wind shoved at my back, harder than any of the others, almost like a push. I stumbled forward a half step. My boot hit the edge of the scale. Under it, the steel felt colder than the concrete. There was a moment, just a sliver, where I had the insane sensation that if I stepped fully onto that platform, something would close around my legs and not let go. I turned and walked fast toward the cab, trying not to break into a run. My flashlight beam jittered over the trailer wheels, the reflective tape, the faint scuffs in the concrete, like something had dragged heavy chains there once. I grabbed the door handle and hauled myself up. The instant I shut the door, the cab felt too small, the air too warm. My breath fogged the glass. The digital readout outside still glowed red. Numbers locked on 14,320 pounds. I flipped my headlights back on and hit the brights at the same time. The world outside flooded in white. The booth glass flashed. The scale platform gleamed. The woman was no longer at the far end. She was inches from my driver's side window, face level with mine, separated by a sheet of glass and a breath of warm cab air. Pale skin gone almost gray under the sodium lights. Hair flattened under the hard hat. Reflective vest banded across her chest. But it was her eyes that stopped my heart mid-beat. Wide, frozen. The look of someone who died between one inhale and the next and never finished either. Not angry, not pleading, just shocked, like she still couldn't believe what had happened. Her mouth was slightly open. No breath fogged the glass. No reflection moved in her pupils. The display behind her flickered, then locked hard at 14,320 pounds. The station went dark. Everything, all at once. The fluorescence, the sign, the little security light above the side door. My brights were suddenly the only light source, carving a hard circle around the truck and the dead building. The engine idle sounded too loud, my own breathing ragged in my ears. For a second, she stayed there, my beams painting her in sharp contrast. Then the light seemed to pass through her, like my headlights had adjusted to ignore her. Her vest dulled, went matte, her outline blurred. My fight or flight finally kicked the right switch. I popped the brakes, shoved it into gear, and rolled forward, slow but steady. Every instinct from every safety class I'd ever taken screamed not to spin, not to panic, not to jerk the wheel. Just roll. As my steers eased off the scale, I flicked my eyes toward the digital readout. 0 pounds. The weight had dropped the instant I moved. I checked the mirror. The woman was gone. The scale was an empty strip of steel. The way station sat dead, black windows and darkened glass, like it had never been on. The only light was mine, and beyond that, the empty highway. I didn't stop until I hit Ely, and even then, I sat in the cab for 30 minutes before I could bring myself to go inside for coffee. My hands shook so bad pouring the first cup that I spilled it on the counter. The old guy behind the register watched me mop it up. "You runnin' 50 tonight?" "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded wrong, too thin. "You come past the port back east?" I hesitated. "The closed one." He nodded, eyes narrowing just a fraction. "Yeah, closed for years now. They ever gonna tear that thing down? They still got power to it?" I asked. My heart picked up again. He shook his head. "Nope, they cut that line after the accident. Station's dead." "Why?" I told him no reason. But when I turned to leave, he spoke up again. "You hear about the inspector they lost out there? 8-9 years back," he said. "Trailer broke loose. Runaway. Pinned her right on the scale. They say they never did get an exact weight. Readout kept jumping between 0 and the axle weight. I knew the number before he said it. 14,320. he muttered. Guy who found her. He quit a week later. Wouldn't go near a port again. The rest of that run, every scale I rolled onto, I watched the readout a little too long. Every time the numbers settled, I felt my chest loosen. But sometimes, late at night, on some lonely stretch with the wind pushing the trailer sideways and the CB dead, I swear I can see her in the corner of my eye, standing just off the steel, hand half raised, waiting to see who's brave or stupid enough to come closer. And if I ever roll onto a scale and see 14320 pop up when it shouldn't, I won't be getting out of the cab. I run nights because I like hearing my own thoughts. Name's Ray. I pull a 2016 Peterbilt 579, 53-foot dry van, mostly food and packing freight out of Omaha, running back and forth across the plains. I've been doing this long enough to know the feel of a good road, a bad trailer, and when the weather's lying to you. Nebraska after midnight is a special kind of quiet. No mountains, no curves, just a long, flat hum and the sky hanging low like a lid. That night I was westbound on I-80, coming out of Lincoln, heading toward North Platte. January, a Tuesday going into Wednesday. Temp sat at 23 according to the dash. Light wind out of the north. Road was bare and dry, but the last front had passed through earlier, left sugared shoulders and thin glass where the overpasses froze first. Dispatch wanted me to push as far as I could before my 11 ran out, so I had about 3 hours left before I needed to shut down. CB was on Channel 19 like always, mostly dead at that time of night. Every now and then you catch a cattle hauler singing to himself, or some eastbound calling out a trooper. I like that background hiss. It's like a heartbeat for the highway. So when it went fully silent, no hash, no faint whisper, just a flat, empty hum, I noticed. About 20 minutes before everything went sideways, I'd keyed up to warn a friend. I'd hit a patch of black ice on an overpass west of York. Didn't spin, but the truck did a little shuffle, steers went light, trailer tugged sideways, that half second where you feel 80,000 pounds think about ignoring you. I eased out of it, dropped a gear, and rolled through. In my mirror, I could see shine on the deck. The bridge looked wet until you looked too close. Soon as my heart stopped ticking in my throat, I grabbed the mic. Northbound, pull it over and check your speed, I'd said. Black ice on that overpass. Don't trust the dry lanes, boys. A buddy of mine, Travis, was about 15 miles back. He crackled on, cussing me for not clearing the whole interstate for him. We laughed about it, I gave him the mile marker, and that was that. I hadn't keyed up since. By 12:40 a.m., the road had settled into that deep late rhythm. Dashed white lines, soft vibration through the wheel, engine humming at a steady 1400 RPM. The sky was a low gray lid. No stars, no moon, just the reflection of my own headlights on the little green mile boards every couple of minutes. I was somewhere between Kearney and Elm Creek. Northbound side nothing but empty. Southbound a stray set of headlights every 10 miles. Coffee had gone lukewarm in the cup holder. The cab smelled like old thermos coffee, diesel, and the faint rubber stink off the floor mat. That's when Channel 19 woke up. It didn't start with a click or a breaker call. It slid in under the noise. A thin voice stretched like it was coming down a long metal pipe. Northbound, pull over. I frowned and reached for the mic. Come again, driver? Where you at? No answer. Just that thin tail of static. I thumbed the squelch down, listening harder. The voice came back, clearer this time, like the signal had found me. Northbound, pull over, black ice ahead. I nearly answered 10-4 on reflex. That's exactly what I'd said 20 minutes back. The cadence, the words, the tone. And then my brain finally lined it up and I felt something cold slide under my ribs. That was my voice. I don't mean it sounded similar. I mean it was me. Same tired edge, same little rasp I get on day 5 of a run. The radio was playing back what I'd said. Same phrasing, same pauses, inside the same night, only I hadn't touched the mic since York. I told myself maybe Travis had recorded it on his phone, keyed up as a joke. Guys mess around. But Skip can do weird things too. Bounce signals off the atmosphere, send you Texas chatter in Wyoming. I clung to that. Travis, that you? I said. You recording me now, you creep? Static answered. Under it, for just a second, I thought I heard breathing. Heavy, too close to the mic. Then my own voice came back again. Northbound, pull over, black ice ahead. Except this time, the words dragged. The syllables stretched wrong, like a tape being pinched. Consonants smeared together. It sounded like me underwater, mouth full of something thick. I dropped my speed from 70 to 60, then 55. The road ahead still looked clean in the headlights. No sheen, no frost building in the ruts. I checked my outside temp, 22. Cold enough to freeze, but if there was ice, I should have seen more signs. Wrecks, tire tracks in the median, somebody pulled over shaking it off. The cab suddenly felt smaller. Warm air from the vents pressed against my face. I cracked the side window an inch. Wind hissed in, carrying that flat prairie cold. The smell of dry grass and distant feedlots. "Knock it off," I muttered, more to myself than the radio. The next transmission wasn't quite my voice. "Pull over." Same words, different weight, deeper, like someone dragging my tone down a few steps. Breathless, each word like an exhale in winter. Something trying to match me and not quite getting there. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I turned the volume down halfway. The noise didn't shrink. It felt like the sound had weight, vibration coming up through the dash. Up ahead, red and amber blinked against the dark. Hazards. I eased off more, brought it down into the low 50s, then the 40s. My eyes narrowed. The semi on the shoulder sat nose forward, right wheels kissing the rumble strip, left tires on the line. Hazards flashed an even pattern, steady, reflecting off the guardrail. No other cars, no flares. Maybe that's who's calling, I told myself. Blown tire, sick driver. As I drew closer, my high beams caught the shape of the rig. Older Freightliner, mid-roof, white trailer with no markings but dirt streaks and road grime. No company name on the door that I could see. Windows black. No movement inside. There was a shape leaning against the driver's door. At first it looked like a guy in a dark jacket, one boot up on the step, head down like he was sheltering from the wind. The closer I got, the more my brain tried to fill in details. Hat, arms, posture. Something was off. His arms hung too low. They reached almost to his knees, elbows crooked at wrong angles, like joints had been added where there shouldn't be any. The shoulders slouched forward in a way that made my own spine ache to look at. The head stayed bowed, making the neck look too long, too thin. Channel 19 exploded. Not just static. This was a blast of white noise that actually made my mirrors buzz. The speaker rattled in its housing. The dash vibrated. For a moment, I thought something under the hood had blown. A belt, a fan, something. But all the gauges still sat where they should. The truck ran fine. It was the radio screaming. Under the roar, sharp and clear, my own voice cut through. "Pull over now." The shape at the other truck's door slowly raised its head. My wheels hit the rumble strip as my hands tightened on the wheel, instinct trying to steer me away without overcorrecting. The Peterbilt shuddered, gravel popping under the right side tires. I fought it back into the lane, keeping my eyes forward, but I couldn't help it. My gaze flicked sideways just as we drew even. The thing by the door was standing straight now. The jacket, if it was a jacket, hung wrong, fabric sagging over too many angles. The arms bent at mid-forearm instead of the elbow, hands dangling just above the step. Fingers splayed too long. Where a face should have been, the darkness under the brim of a hat, or what I thought was a hat, held two pale ovals. Not eyes exactly, just blank patches, lighter than the rest. His mouth moved. I didn't hear it through the glass. I heard it through the CB. "Pull over now." My exact inflection. My throat. My sound. I did the only thing training and instinct ever agree on when something's wrong in a way you can't name. I kept going. No braking. No gunning it like a rookie. Just steady pressure, gradual acceleration, easing the truck past like I was gliding by a trooper with a customer under his bumper. My hands shook on the wheel even as my face stayed flat, eyes locked on the lane ahead. As my trailer cleared the nose of the parked semi, the radio shrieked. One long, ripping blast of noise that made my teeth hurt. Then it cut dead. No static, no hiss, nothing. Just the low hum of the engine and the wind clawing at the sides of the cab. I drove like that for 10 miles, heart trying to climb out of my throat, eyes flicking between mirrors and road, waiting for any sign of that Freightliner's lights behind me. Nothing came. At the next open way station, I-80 westbound, just before North Platte, the sign flashed open, all trucks. Under any other circumstances, I would have cursed and rolled through. That night, I felt grateful to see another human being in an official capacity, someone with a badge and a clipboard and a computer that said what did and didn't exist on that stretch. I pulled in, rolled onto the platform, watched the overhead red and green cycle. The scale beeped, flashed my weight, and the speaker crackled to life. Truck on the platform, pull around back to the building. The trooper inside was middle-aged, heavy coat over his uniform, gray starting at the temples. Name tag said Klein. He gave my paperwork a once-over, flipped through my logbook screen, nodded. "You see any wrecks back east?" he asked, casual. "No, sir," I said. "Why?" "We got a 911 from a motorist about a semi on the shoulder, hazards going, driver down by the door. Somewhere between 261 and 265. Units went out, didn't find anything." He eyed me over the edge of the tablet. "You didn't feel like stopping?" I swallowed. My tongue felt dry. "I saw a truck with hazards on," I admitted. "Didn't see anyone in distress." He studied my face a moment longer, like he could pull something else out if he looked hard enough. Then he shrugged. "People see things in the dark," he said. "Especially out there. Lot of nothing for your brain to chew on." "Yeah," I said. "I guess so." He handed the tablet back, then paused. "Channel 19 been acting weird to you tonight?" he asked, almost offhand. I stared. "How do you mean?" Couple drivers reported what sounds like their own transmissions bouncing back at them. Old ones. Wrong times. His mouth twisted. "Guys get jumpy on the radio. I get calls." I thought about the voice telling me to pull over. My voice twisted into something else's shape. The long arms. The wrong posture. The way the radio had gone dead afterward, like something had climbed into the line and chewed straight through it. "Probably just skip," I said. He didn't look convinced, but he didn't press it. "You're good to go," he said instead. "Watch the bridges. They glaze over fast." Back in the cab, I turned the CB volume down to almost nothing. The hiss sat there like a breathing thing, never quite going away. I finished my hours for the night, shut down in the back row of a truck stop, curtains drawn tight, engine off. Sleep didn't come easy. Since that night, I still run 19. Habit, safety, all that. But when I key up, northbound, watch for a couch in the left lane, or eastbound, scales open, boys. I listen a little too hard to the air afterward. Sometimes, on dead still nights in the middle of the plains, I swear I hear myself answer back from 50 miles behind, saying the same thing with just enough wrong in it to raise goosebumps on my arms. And if I ever hear my own voice tell me to pull over again when I haven't touched the mic, I won't be looking at the shoulders to see who's waiting. I'll be looking straight ahead, praying the road keeps going. I've been running that stretch of I-90 so long I could probably draw it from memory. Name's Mark. I pull a 2019 Kenworth T680, 53-foot reefer, hauling grocery freight between Spokane and Billings. I've been doing that back and forth for 15 years now. Same mountain passes, same grades, same wind pushing down off the Rockies. Same night stops. There's a little rest area eastbound, just past mile 212 in Montana. You'd miss it if you weren't looking for it. 2 vending machines with stale candy, 1 brick bathroom building, 1 beat-up picnic table with carvings going back to the 80s. That place has been my halfway mark, my bathroom break, my stretch-your-back stop since I was green. I know how it's supposed to look under the moon, under snow, with summer bugs hitting the lights like rain. I know the way your headlights sweep the same old sign. Rest area 212. White letters, green background, half shot with rock chips. That's why the night it changed, I knew something was wrong before I even set the brakes. It was January, middle of the week. I rolled out of Billings late, fighting a delay at the dock, and by the time I was crossing into the darker stretch past Livingston, it was close to midnight. Snow had come through earlier in the evening, but most of it had blown off the asphalt. The outside temp sat right at 17 degrees, dry cold that finds any gap in your seals. The road was mostly bare, black ribbon under my low beams, shoulders caked with plowed snow like dirty walls. The CB was quiet, not dead, just that low bed of hash and the occasional faint voice too far away to catch. My reefer unit droned steady behind me, cycling every few minutes, a familiar heartbeat. The cab was warm, the kind of stuffy heat that makes your skin damp under a hoodie. I'd been planning the stop at rest area 212 all night. Get out, hit the bathroom, maybe walk a lap around the truck, splash my face with cold water. I knew when it was coming before I saw the sign. You get that sixth sense for your regular route. The mile markers ticked down, 215, 214, 213. Then the blue advance sign appeared out of the dark. Rest area 1 mile. The font was right. The reflectivity was right. But something about the spacing of the words made my eyes itch. I chalked it up to fatigue. Took a sip of lukewarm coffee, rolled my shoulders and stayed in the right lane. The ramp came up exactly where it always does. Gentle curve off to the right, rumble strips humming under the steer tires. I signaled, dropped my speed, and coasted down the ramp, tires crackling over scattered gravel and frozen sand. That's when the first wrong thing hit me. The lot opened up in front of me, rectangle of pavement carved out of pine and scrub. But the building was on the wrong side. For 15 years, the brick restroom has been on the left as you pull in, vending machines bolted to the wall facing the parking area. Picnic table under a scraggly tree to the right. I've sat at that table watching dawn come up more times than I can count. Tonight, the building sat on the right. Same rough shape, same single story, low roofline with frost along the edges. But flipped, mirrors reversed, and the picnic table was on the left, under a tree that looked taller than it should have been. Branches knotted tighter, shadows hanging down like ropes. I eased the Kenworth into a pull-through slot, engine idling low, lights washing across old faded pavement arrows that pointed a direction that didn't make sense. There were no other vehicles, no cars, no trucks, just my rig, my breath fogging the glass, and that building squatting in the sick yellow pool of sodium lights. The bulbs buzzed overhead, a faint, uneven hum. They were older fixtures than I remembered. Metal cages around the glass, rust streaks dripping down onto the poles. The glow they threw wasn't as bright. It left more shadows. As I straightened in the slot, the main blue sign at the entrance flashed in my mirror, bouncing my high beams back at me. I glanced at it out of habit. Rest area 214. My first thought was stupidly practical. They renumbered? Construction? I hadn't heard anything on the radio, nothing in the bulletins. Then the little knot in my gut tightened. 214 should be farther east. 212 was the one I'd used 100 times. I set the brakes. The air dumped out with a sigh that sounded too loud in the empty lot. The reefer rattled on its cycle. The wind pushed at the cab, making it rock a fraction, whispering along the mirror brackets with that hollow, fluted sound it gets in winter. There was someone sitting at the picnic table. He was in a trucker cap, bill pulled down low. Dark jacket zipped up to his throat. Hands folded in front of him on the tabletop. He faced straight ahead, not toward my truck, not toward the building. Just ahead, like he was staring at something that wasn't there. Even from a distance, something about the stillness of him was wrong. People shift. They fidget, scratch their nose, adjust their hat. He didn't. I give every stranger the same cautious respect out here. But a guy who doesn't move at all under flickering lights in the middle of nowhere at 12:15 a.m. sets off alarms. I tapped the city horn twice. Not leaning on it, just 2 short chirps, friendly but loud enough to get his attention. He didn't flinch, didn't turn, didn't twitch, didn't even turn his cap brim toward me. The wind gusted then, throwing a sheet of dry snow dust across the lot. It obscured him for half a second. When it passed, he was still sitting in the exact same position. Hat, jacket, hands. I told myself he was asleep sitting up. I didn't believe it, but the story was something to hold on to. Nature was calling, and I'd been counting on this stop. I killed my headlights, leaving the engine and markers on, grabbed my gloves, and stepped down into the cold. It bit through my jeans instantly. The air had that metallic taste you get when the temperature drops and stays there, no humidity to soften it. My boots scuffed frozen grit as I walked toward the building. The only sound was my own footsteps and the distant rush of trucks out on the main line, muffled by the trees. Up close, the building looked older than it should have. The brick was darker, mortar cracked in spiderweb patterns. The door was painted a dull brown, peeling around the handle from too many winters. A square metal sign bolted to it said men in block letters, edges rusted. I glanced back over my shoulder before I went in. The man at the picnic table sat exactly as before. Same angle of his cap, same set of his shoulders. The sodium light above him flickered, dimmed, then steadied. He didn't react. Inside, the bathroom was colder than outside. Concrete floor, cinder block walls painted a color that might have been white once. The fluorescence overhead hummed and flickered, a faint delay between motions and shadows. The smell hit me. Bleach trying and failing to cover old urine and damp stone. I went into the first stall. The metal door creaked on tired hinges. When I swung it shut, I saw the words carved into the inside. "You've been here before." Jagged letters, cut deep into the paint and metal, each stroke showing bare steel underneath. Not graffiti pen, not marker. Someone had taken a key, a knife, something sharp, and gouged the words in slow, angry motions. I frowned. Weird, but not supernatural. CTL drivers tag things everywhere. I stepped into the next stall. The door swung freely, hinge whining. "You've been here before." Same depth, same hand, same spacing. Third stall, same message, over and over, carved at eye level. Every door, the same phrase. No other tags, no phone numbers, no band names, no crude drawings. Just that one line, like the rest area itself was insisting on something. The hair rose on my arms under my coat. I finished my business fast, trying not to let my imagination grab hold. As I washed my hands, I looked up at the warped mirror bolted above the sink. For a split second, the reflection showed the bathroom I remembered: brighter tiles, different soap dispenser, a bulletin board on the far wall that wasn't there in reality. Then the fluorescence flickered and it was just this place again. Older. Wrong. I dried my hands on my jeans and got out of there. The cold outside felt better. Realer. The wind cut across the lot, bringing the smell of pine and diesel, the faint tang of hot coolant from under my hood. My truck sat where I'd left it, idling low, exhaust puffing small gray ghosts into the night. The picnic table was empty. Hatman was gone. The bench was bare wood, darkened by years of weather. No coat left behind, no coffee cup, no trash. Just a light dusting of snow on the seat, untouched. But the pavement told a different story. Around my Kenworth, boot tracks circled in the thin powder. Not just a path, not a straight line from the table to the building. Circles. Wide arcs, tight loops. Someone had walked around my rig again and again, changing direction, overlapping their own prints, wearing a trampled ring in the frost around my tires and steps. They weren't my tracks. Different tread, narrower foot. My eyes went to the driver's door, then to the passenger. Locked. I knew they were locked. I always hit the switch out of habit. Still, I checked them both. The cab suddenly felt very far away. I swallowed, forcing my breathing slow. The thought of bending to look under the truck, to peer into the shadow under the trailer, felt like volunteering for something I didn't want to know. The wind eased for a moment. In that narrow, quiet pocket, the reefer unit cut out. The sudden absence of its drone made the lot feel wrong, like a song had stopped in the middle of a verse. That's when the truck moved. It wasn't a big shift, just a subtle rock, a creak through the frame. The same way it settles when someone heavy steps up on the catwalk between cab and trailer. You feel that through your boot soles after enough years, the way the suspension passes that weight along the spine of the machine. There was no one on the steps, no one in the mirror, but the sensation was unmistakable. Something had climbed onto the back of my truck. Fight or flight doesn't exist much out here. It's usually just deal with it. But something in me chose without asking. I didn't look back. I closed the distance to the door fast, grabbed the handle, hauled myself up, and slammed it behind me. The cab swallowed me in familiar smells. Old coffee, sweat, the faint chemical sweetness of windshield washer fluid. I twisted the lock, thumb pressing harder than it needed to. The truck rocked again, just slightly, the sort of settling you feel when someone walks from one side of the catwalk to the other. My right hand hovered over the trailer brake valve for a heartbeat, stupid thought flashing through my mind. If I popped it, would whatever was out there feel it as a challenge? Instead, I eased the clutch in, released the brakes in one smooth motion, and rolled. Slow at first, just enough to feel the drive tires bite into the cold pavement. Then faster, following the faded exit arrows out of the lot. In my mirrors, the rest area slid away. For half a second, as my beams caught the main sign again, the green shifted. Rest area 212, the number I knew, then rest area 214. It shimmered between the two like heat over asphalt. Then the ramp spat me back onto I-90. The highway lights swallowed everything behind me. 20 minutes later, the familiar blue sign appeared on my right. Rest area 1 mile. My chest tightened. I told myself it was a duplicate sign. Bad placement. My clock could be off. But the exit came up in a slightly different spot. The curve felt right. The lot opened up in a way my body recognized before my eyes did. Before I even pulled in, I knew. The building was back on the left. The vending machines shone under newer lights. The picnic table sat under a stunted pine, carvings exactly where my fingers remembered them. The main sign read Rest Area 212, just like it had for 15 years. I didn't stop. I rolled past at 60, eyes front, knuckles white on the wheel, watching the glow of that safe, ordinary place slide by in my peripheral vision. The CB hissed softly. The reefer droned back into its rhythm. The outside temp held at 17. Later, I checked the state DOT maps. There's no Rest Area 214 on that stretch of I-90. Never has been. But sometimes, on dead quiet nights when the road feels longer than it should, I see a set of sodium lights in the mirror that don't match anything on the atlas. And if I ever feel the truck shift like that again with no one on the steps, I won't be getting out to see what climbed aboard. Because whatever I stopped at that night wasn't supposed to exist. I've always said the salt flats at night will mess with your head if you let them. Name's Dalton. I run a 2017 Volvo VNL 780, pulling a 53-foot dry van, mostly consumer goods out of Reno headed east to Salt Lake, then on to Denver if my hours line up. I've been doing this run long enough to know every stretch of I-80 across the Utah desert, where the cops like to sit, where the pavement heaves in the heat, which mile markers vanish in blowing salt. If you've never seen the Great Salt Lake Desert at midnight, picture this. Black sky, white ground, and a thin strip of asphalt cutting right through the middle like a scar. You can smell salt in the air even with the vents closed, dry and metallic, mixing with the diesel and the stale coffee in your cup holder. Your headlights don't hit trees or buildings, just a flat, glowing emptiness on both sides, like the world ends 3 feet off the shoulder. That's where I was that night, eastbound on I-80, rolling through the dark bowl of the salt flats a little after 1 in the morning. Outside temp sat at 28 degrees according to the dash. No wind worth mentioning, just the faint push of air around 80,000 pounds of truck and trailer. The road was dry, sky clear. Stars were out there somewhere, but the reflection off the flats eats a lot of that light. Mostly what you see is your own beams and the pale smear of the horizon. I had about 4 hours left on my drive clock. Load was light for once, barely 45,000 gross, fabric and boxed housewares. The truck felt nimble, responsive. Cruise set a hair under 70 RPM, sitting in that smooth band where the engine just hums and the vibration through the wheel feels like a steady pulse. CB was on channel 19 like always. Out there it's mostly white noise with the occasional westbound double talking to himself to stay awake. Tonight, even the chatter was thin. Just that low-bed hash between transmissions that starts to sound like a distant ocean if you listen too long. I remember checking my mirrors every couple of minutes out of habit. Left, right, spot mirrors, trailer doors. Nothing but darkness and a faint ghost of my own marker lights bouncing off the salt. Then a pair of headlights appeared behind me. No slow creep into view. No distant pinpricks growing larger. One glance in the mirror, they weren't there. The next glance, they were. Two bright white circles. Low to the ground. Dead center behind my trailer. Close. Too close for comfort. My first thought was some four-wheeler doing that stupid thing where they draft a semi for no reason, sitting in the blind spot pocket. I eased off the cruise, brought it down a few miles an hour, and waited for them to either back off or go around. They didn't. Whatever it was held exactly the same distance off my bumper. Not creeping, not lagging, just locked. I dropped another 3 miles an hour. The headlights dropped with me. I bumped it back up. They came right along, like we were chained together. I watched them in the mirror for a good 30 seconds, the way they trembled just a hair with the imperfections in the road. No sway left and right. No up or down bounce like a suspension working. Just a constant, precise gap. Felt too smooth, too clean. I thumbed the mic, eastbound 80 in the flats. You riding my icy bumper for a reason, driver? My voice sounded calm in the cab. My hands on the wheel were anything but. No answer. The CB hissed, the white noise thick and fine-grained. But no voice came back. I tried again. Car or truck behind the white Volvo, you got a copy? Nothing. I thought about brake-checking them just enough to make a point, but that's how you end up on the news. Instead, I eased onto the right shoulder just enough to kick up dust, tapped my brakes to flash the lights, and rolled my right side tires onto the rumble strip for a second. The truck shuddered, that grinding buzz vibrating up through the frame and into my feet. The headlights never flinched. No dip, no correction. They stayed exactly where they were, like they weren't on the road at all. On the CB, a whisper slid in under the static. Don't look in your mirrors. Not loud. Not a normal transmission. It had that thin, faraway quality like Skip from 3 states over. But it came through clear as if the speaker was right next to my ear. No handle, no breaker call. Just those 4 words spoken slow. Don't look in your mirrors. I froze with my thumb hovering over the mic button. Say again. I asked even though I didn't really want them to. The hiss thickened. No repeat. No explanation. The channel went back to that soft, endless ocean sound. Trucker brain, I told myself. Too much caffeine, not enough sleep. I looked in the mirror anyway. The headlights were higher. They weren't sitting at car level anymore. They floated above the road, maybe 10, 12 feet off the deck. Too high for a pickup. Higher than my own cab lights, just above the plane where another truck's headlights would be. They swayed slightly. Not with the bumps in the asphalt, but in a slow, pendulum way, like whatever was carrying them was suspended from something above, moving on an arc you couldn't see. I felt my scalp prickle. You get used to the geometry of lights out here, the height of a Peterbilt, the low glare of a sedan, the angry blue of a trooper's bar. This didn't fit any of it. It sat in the wrong place in the air. My foot got heavy on the accelerator. The speedometer climbed. 72. 75. The engine note rose. The vibration picked up. The salt flats blurred faster past the edge of my headlights. The lights behind me followed perfectly. Same distance. Same height. Same soft, hypnotic sway. The whisper came back on 19, right in the middle of the static. Don't look in your mirrors. The voice sounded like it was coming from directly behind my seat now, low and almost patient. I stared dead ahead, hands locked at 10 and 2, watching the lane lines tick under me. My breathing had gone shallow without me noticing. I forced a couple deep lungfuls of the hot, dry cab air. The smell of diesel, old coffee, and faint salt burned my nose. The ABS light on the dash flickered once. Just a flash, there and gone. No reason. No braking, no will slip. Every driver knows that light is supposed to mean business. Seeing it blink on its own is like feeling your heart skip. Up ahead, the world was nothing but black sky and my own twin beams cutting over endless white. The headlights behind me vanished. 1 second they were there in the mirror, floating too high, swaying just off center. The next, There was only darkness. A flat black hole where my trailer doors disappeared beyond the glow of my markers. No taper, no fade, just gone like someone hit a switch. Relief hit me like a shot of adrenaline. I let out a breath, laughed once. Short, ugly, too loud in the cab. Ghost stories and sodium levels, that's all. Then, maybe 3 seconds later, the lights reappeared. Not behind me, in front of me. They flicked on in the middle of my lane, 20 yards ahead, hanging above the asphalt. Suspended in the air at the same impossible height, moving laterally now, drifting across both lanes like pendants on invisible strings. My high beams hit them and bounced off hard, like they were solid glass. No outlines of a vehicle, no silhouette, just two bright, perfect circles sliding through the dark. I slammed the brake pedal without thinking. The truck's nose dipped, ABS light flaring fully this time as the system chattered, valves clicking under my feet. The steering wheel shook. The trailer pushed forward, that sick feeling of mass trying to overtake you. The floating headlights didn't react. They passed calmly from the left lane to the right shoulder, then started rising. Slowly, they drifted upward into the sky, higher than a billboard would be, higher than any overpass. They moved like balloons slipping a tether, climbing at a steady rate, angle unchanged. My foot wavered between brake and throttle, not sure which command to give. The truck slowed down to 50, then 45. ABS chatter faded. The rumble of tires on pavement came back clearer. The lights kept climbing until they were hanging far above the highway, two small, distant stars. Then they blinked out like someone pinched a candle. Darkness. I rolled at 40 for a while, heart thudding so hard I could feel it in my fingers. My mouth tasted like copper. The CB hissed softly, no more whispers. My mirrors showed only my trailer's marker lights bouncing faintly off the salt. I didn't see another vehicle for the next 30 miles. By the time I hit the stretch where the flats give way to more familiar land, my breathing had slowed. The bizarre started to feel like a story I'd misremembered in real time. I chalked it up to fatigue, optical illusions, weird test equipment in the desert. You learn to rationalize out here. If you didn't, you'd park the truck and never move again. I stopped at the first open port of entry. The Utah Highway Patrol officer at the way station was a lanky guy with tired eyes. Late shift like me. He waved me over after the scale, took my paperwork, glanced at my logs. Routine stuff. "You look like hell," he said, not unkindly. "Road getting to you? Salt flats'll do that," I said. Then, against my better judgment, I added, "You ever get calls out there about weird lights?" He paused with my bills in his hand. "What kind of weird?" "Headlights," I said. "No vehicle. Floating. Moving wrong." He held my gaze a second too long, then looked past me, out toward the east where the darkness swallowed the interstate. "Back in the 70s, he said slowly, they used this desert to test crash scenarios. Experimental aircraft, remote rigs, that kind of thing. Lot of black-budget toys. Some of those planes crashed out there. Some never got recovered. Some," he shrugged, "some folks say they never really stopped the testing. Just got better at hiding it." The explanation didn't sit right, but it was something. Mechanical. Human. He handed my paperwork back. But before I could thank him and climb down, he added, almost like he didn't want to, "Thing is, what you're describing. Those weren't aircraft lights. We get a few reports every year of floating headlights out on 80. He scratched his jaw. "Usually ends with a driver going missing. Rig found on the shoulder. No sign of the operator." My stomach went cold. "Missing how?" He shook his head once. "Doesn't matter. You're here. Just, if something wants you looking in your mirrors that bad, maybe don't give it what it wants." He stepped back, tapped the side of my truck twice with his knuckles, and waved me on. That was 3 years ago. I still run that route. Still cross the flats at night because freight doesn't care what scares you. I keep my CB on, but when the channel goes too quiet and the salt glows too bright under the stars, I stay away from my mirrors more than I used to. Sometimes, when I'm dead center in that white emptiness, I get the feeling of something pacing me just out of sight. Every now and then, A pair of headlights appears far behind, then vanishes if I look too long. And on the worst nights, when the sky's black and the horizon disappears, I swear I can hear a whisper slip through the static on 19, sliding right up behind my ear. Don't look in your mirrors. I never do. Not anymore. You spend enough winters out here and you start thinking you've made friends with the cold. Name's Harlan. I pull a 2015 Cascadia, 53-foot reefer, mostly grocery freight between Cheyenne and Salt Lake. I-80 is my backyard, Elk Mountain, Arlington, that whole stretch locals warn you about on windy days. I've had my doors slapped by gusts hard enough to shove 80,000 pounds sideways a foot. I've chained up on the side of the road at 3 in the morning with ice needles hitting my face sideways. I know what cold feels like. What hit me that night wasn't weather. I rolled out of Cheyenne late, heavy. Trailer full of frozen product, so the reefer was humming strong behind me. January. Sky clear, stars sharp above the black outline of the hills. Wyoming DOT signs had been flashing all afternoon. High wind warning. Light high-profile vehicles advised no travel. But by the time I left the yard, it had calmed to a steady 20, 30 miles an hour. Normal for up there. By midnight, I was westbound out of Laramie, climbing toward Elk Mountain. The outside temp on the dash read 31 degrees Fahrenheit. Not warm, not brutal. Road was dry, but you could see the old snow in the ditches, crusted and dirty under the guardrails. The wind had that low, constant push from the south, nudging the trailer toward the right lane line every couple of minutes. Nothing I hadn't fought 100 times. Inside the cab, I kept it at a comfortable 72. Heater on low through the floor vents. Defroster cracked just enough to keep the windshield clear. The air smelled like stale truck stop coffee and the faint ammonia tang from the reefer when the wind pushed it just right. CB on 19, background hiss with the occasional voice. A cattle hauler warning about ice near Rollins. A guy cussing at his dispatcher. A trooper report. It's like company out there. Lets you know the world hasn't gone completely silent. My drive clock said 12:02 a.m. when I saw the sign. ELK Mountains 7 miles. I took a sip of coffee. It was still warm. The wheel buzzed under my hands. Familiar vibration of rubber on rough winter asphalt. My headlights picked out the reflectors along the guardrail, each little diamond flashing bright then gone. At 12:03 a.m., the cab changed. It happened in less than a heartbeat. One breath, I was inhaling hot dust and coffee. The next, it felt like someone opened a meat locker on my chest. The warm air vanished. Not cooled, vanished. The temperature dropped so fast my ears ached. The skin on my face prickled like I'd stepped outside without a jacket. My breath turned visible in front of me, thick white clouds that hung in the air too long. I glanced at the dash. Outside temp still read 31. Inside gauge, if you trust those cheap little thermometers, dropped from 72 to 40 in what felt like seconds. The vents at my knees went from blowing warm to exhaling air so cold it stung through my jeans. I reached instinctively for the climate controls, thinking blower motor failure, heater core, something mechanical. My fingers stopped halfway. Frost was forming on the vents. Not condensation. Not fog. Actual frost. White crystals blooming around the plastic grills, creeping outward, feathering over the edges like time-lapse footage. I watched my own breath drift past them, hazy in the dim dash glow. The windshield, clear a moment ago, fogged over in an instant, then began to glaze at the corners. The reefer hum behind me stayed steady. Engine temp was normal. The heater fan still spun. I could hear it. But what it was pushing into the cab wasn't air from the engine bay. It felt like it was pulling from somewhere else. I flicked the defrost to full, cranked the temp knob all the way to hot, and bumped the fan up. The vents responded with a louder rush of air that somehow felt even colder. On the passenger side, the glass went white. Frost crawled in swirling patterns from the edges toward the center. A spiderweb of ice that caught my headlights from the outside and threw weird fractured light around the cab. That's when the first handprint appeared. It materialized from the inside. An oval of clarity bloomed in the frost, about the size of a man's hand, 5 finger-shaped splayed. No smear from skin pressing into snow. It was like the frost simply refused to form in that shape. The edges were sharp. You could see the condensation from the warmer air right at the boundary, like it was breathing. Then another handprint opened beside it, slightly higher, fingers spread wider as if whoever or whatever was pressing there had longer hands, more reach. Then a third, overlapping the first two. Palm lower, fingers stretched, like something was testing the glass, mapping out the limits of its surface. The steering wheel felt slick in my hands. I realized there was sweat on my palms even as the air around me bit like January air with the door open. My breath came fast, each exhale adding to the fog in front of my face. I hit the lock buttons on instinct. Both doors thunked shut mechanically. The locks had already been down. I hadn't opened anything since rolling out of the yard. The little orange indicators on the switches glowed back at me, accusing. My thumb was shaking when I pulled it away. The CB crackled. Not the usual chatter. A low, constant hum seeped into the cab, deeper than the normal white noise, almost like a voice so low you couldn't make out words. The speaker vibrated, a thin metal buzz that set my teeth on edge. It sounded like someone trying to breathe through a long steel pipe, inhale and exhale dragging against the sides. I turned the volume down. The sound stayed the same. I twisted the knob to 0, then off. The hum kept going, climbing a fraction higher, like it was pleased with itself. The interior dome lights flickered on their own, blinked twice, then steadied at half-bright. Everything took on that sickly yellow cast, bouncing off the frost on the glass, making the handprints look like empty spaces cut out of snow. Keeping 80,000 pounds under control on winter Wyoming interstate doesn't leave a lot of room for panic. My body went into autopilot, eyes on the lane, small corrections for the wind, foot feathering the throttle to keep a steady 60. My brain, though, was stuck on the passenger window. The handprints multiplied, one at shoulder height, two more near the bottom, impression of knuckles at the edge, like something was gripping the sill from inside. Each one formed the same way. Frost refusing to touch that patch, condensation blooming in its place, as if warm skin was pressed flat against invisible ice. I told myself it was some insane heater core rupture, vent lines blowing super cold air out of the dash. I told myself I'd find a leak, a busted valve, an explanation. Then something moved in the frost. It started as a vague darker spot beyond the glass, a shadow in the already poor visibility, a hollow forming in the white. Slowly, the shape pushed closer, pressing into the frost from outside. The ice thinned where it touched, thinning from white to gray to clear patches. A face emerged, not all at once. First, the empty suggestion of eye sockets, dark and deep behind the glass. Then the bridge of a nose flattening against it. The frost melted in a rough oval where a forehead would be, beads of condensation forming and freezing at the edges. The features were distorted by the thickness of the ice, but what I saw was unmistakably human. Except the proportions were wrong. The eyes seemed a fraction too far apart. The cheeks stretched long, like something had pulled from chin to crown. This mouth was the worst part, pressed up against the glass and kept going, as if it didn't know when to stop. Lips peeled back in a grin that climbed too high toward the ears, teeth wide and pale behind the frost. No fog came from that mouth as it hovered there, just that impossible stretch. The CB hum deepened, resolving for a second into something like a voice underwater, then back into vibration. I could feel the cold now in my bones. The steering wheel burned with it where my bare fingers touched the worn leather. My toes cramped in my boots. The air felt thick, heavy to pull in, each inhale stinging my throat. The thing outside exhaled. I didn't hear it. I saw it. A wash of clear air flowed from its mouth, cutting a path through the frost. It didn't cloud like normal breath. It melted. The ice thinned in the arc of its exhale, leaving streaks of bare glass that refroze at the edges. The pattern it made, starting at the corners of the too wide mouth and curling upward, was unmistakable. A smile. It melted a smile into the frost. Something in me finally snapped from frozen shock to action. I dropped a gear, mashed the throttle, and let the Cascadia surge. The engine roared, turbo whining as the truck leapt from 60 to 65, then 70. The vibration changed pitch under my feet, tires humming harder against the road, the wind noise rising. As I accelerated, the cab warmed. Not gradually. The temperature climbed like someone turned a dial. The air lost its knife edge. The frost on the vents began to weep, beads of water forming and rolling down the plastic. The inside fog on the windshield thinned, retreating toward the corners. The face on the passenger window stayed. It didn't smear or vanish as the glass warmed. The melted smile marks remained clear. The handprint patches stayed stark against the thinning frost, like permanent scars in the moisture. The CB hum cut off mid-breath. The speaker went dead, leaving a silence that made the engine noise feel twice as loud. By the time I crested the pass and started down the other side, the inside temp gauge was back near 70. My breath no longer showed in the air. My hands, though, still felt like they belonged to someone else, numb and too tight on the wheel. I didn't look directly at the passenger window again until I pulled into the Petro at Rollins around 3. Lot was half full. Yellow light pools, other trucks breathing diesel ghosts into the cold. I found a parking spot away from the main flow, set the brakes, and sat there listening to the engine tick as it cooled. The handprints were still there. The rest of the frost had long since melted, leaving faint water trails down the glass. But where those palms and fingers had been, the outline remained in a thin film of crystalline ice. Each line sharp, each fingertip defined. No matter how much the cab warmed, they didn't fade. I ran my hand along the inside of the passenger door. The metal was room temperature. No draft, no moisture. But when my fingers passed over the spot where the prints marked the glass, I felt a faint chill, like the echo of what had been there. I slept bad that night. Every creak of the truck made me flinch. The reefer cycling on woke me out of shallow dreams. When dawn finally bled weakly over the lot, the prints were still etched into the glass, glittering faintly in the early light. At the shop back in Cheyenne, I told the mechanic I was having climate issues. No way I was giving him the full story. He pulled the dash apart, muttering about actuators and blend doors, checked pressure in the heater core, flushed the system. "You've got ice crystals in your ducting," he said at one point. Half his body shoved under my wheel, flashlight picking out the guts of the ventilation system. "Like someone packed snow in here and let it sit." "It was in the 30s last night," I said. "Cab was at 67 at least. Shouldn't be anything freezing in there." He slid out on the creeper, wiped his hands. The look he gave me said he'd heard something similar before and hadn't liked the ending. "Yeah," he said slowly. "Shouldn't." He couldn't tell me why the passenger window still held faint ghost prints of hands hours later, even after we heated the cab to the point I was cracking the door for air. By the next week they'd finally faded, but if you catch the glass at the right angle on a cold morning, you can still see where they'd been, just enough to make you doubt your own memory. I've run that stretch of I-80 100 times since. I keep the heater a little lower now, a little less comfortable. Something about being too warm in the cab makes me nervous. Feels like an invitation. Every time the outside temp sits in the low 30s and the wind comes off Elk Mountain just so, I feel that phantom chill across my face and my fingers tighten on the wheel. And when the vent air suddenly feels a few degrees colder than it should, I don't look at the passenger window. I already know what I'll see there. I've never been the type to blame the road for what people bring onto it. Name's Ellis. I pull a 2018 Peterbilt 579, 53-foot dry van, running mostly between El Paso and Albuquerque, border warehouses, distribution centers, the odd LTL mix when the money's right. I do a lot of night work out there. Less traffic, less DOT, more room to let the crews sit and the miles slide. New Mexico has official highways, and then it has the roads locals warn you about with a different tone. M375 is one of those. They call it the hidden highway down near the border. Runs long and lonely, skirting scrub desert and dry washes. The kind of place where signals die and the sky feels too big. I'd run it maybe 4-5 times before that night. Enough to know it's quicker if you hit it at off hours. Enough to know you don't see many cars between the junctions. I'd also heard the usual truck stop talk. Lights where they shouldn't be, shapes on the shoulder, border patrol trucks that weren't really there. I chalked most of it up to boredom and caffeine. The night this happened, I rolled off I-10 near El Paso a little before 11, swung onto 375 northbound and settled in. Late September, desert cooled off just enough that the heat wasn't punching through the cab anymore. Outside temps sat at 67 degrees Fahrenheit according to the dash. Sky was clear, no moon, stars scattered like salt. The kind of black where your headlights carve two hard cones and everything outside that is just suggestion. The road out there is simple. 2 lanes, narrow shoulders, white lines already sun-faded, reflectors spaced just enough to give you a rhythm. On either side, low scrub, yucca, dirt so pale it almost glows. No billboards, no truck stops, just the hum of the tires and the occasional low, distant thrum of a freight train somewhere off the desert. CB was on 19, dead quiet. Every now and then I'd catch a burst of Spanish from some southbound, or a border patrol unit saying something coded and clipped. Mostly it was just static. The kind of static your brain turns into whispers if you listen long enough, so you stop listening. My load was light, consumer electronics, palletized and wrapped. I could feel it in the way the Pete climbed the small grades without dropping out of cruise, in the way the steering felt a little more sensitive on the long flats. I had about 3 hours left on my 11. Enough to reach my planned staging lot if nothing slowed me down. The first sign that stuck in my head was a simple green one, mile 9. I remember it because the paint was fresher than the rest, numbers bright, posts straight. Then mile 10, a little more scuffed. Mile 11, half leaning, bullet hole through the corner. Desert math. A few minutes between each at highway speed. By the time my dash clock rolled over to 11:56 p.m., the world had narrowed to that cycle. Markers, scrub, sky. The soft vibration in the wheel like a second pulse. My eyes were starting to feel that late-night burn. The kind you fix with a yawn and a sip of lukewarm coffee. My GPS pinged, tiny recalculation blip, just enough color to pull my eyes for half a second. The route line was smooth, nothing surprising. When I looked back up, mile 12 flashed by on the right. I knew then what was coming next. 13. I'm not superstitious. My logbooks are clean, my inspections by the book. I'll run Friday the 13th loads with black cats painted on the trailer and not blink. But something about the number hanging out there in the dark made me sit up a little straighter. The dash clock clicked to 12 a.m. The top of the windshield was just empty black. My low beams slid over more scrub, more pale dirt, a thin flash of a road sign up ahead. Mile 13. The sign passed in the periphery, and that was when I saw him. He stood on the shoulder, right-hand side, maybe 2 feet beyond the rumble strip. Small, 8-9 years old at most. Bare feet on the gravel, pale against the dirt. Pajamas, the cheap kind, printed with little rockets, pants too short for his ankles. His hair was dark and stuck up in tufts. His arms hung at his sides. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring straight across the road at the median, eyes fixed on some point I couldn't see, like he was watching something that wasn't there anymore. The first beat, my brain did the normal driver math. Kid, road, no cars, no houses, no headlights behind. My foot moved to the brake without permission, easing off the throttle. The truck dropped from 65 to 55 as I passed him. My face turned slightly toward the passenger window to keep him in sight. He didn't look, didn't flinch in my headlights, didn't squint, didn't turn, didn't step back from 80,000 pounds of steel and freight blowing past him 10 feet away. The air draft from the trailer should have tugged his shirt, his hair, something. He stayed perfectly still, staring at the empty median. By the time the truck rolled fully past, I'd already lost the mental argument with myself. You don't leave a kid out there. Even if it's wrong, even if it's 10 kinds of messed up, you don't. I hit my four-ways, slowed to a crawl, and eased onto the shoulder. Gravel popped under the right side tires. The truck wobbled as my steers hit the rumble strip. I stopped maybe 100 yards ahead of where he'd been, nose slightly angled away from the lane, engine idling low. The desert went silent. My hazards clicked, tick, 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 echoing in the cab. Outside, the The cool air wrapped around the hood and bled into the seams. I checked my mirrors. The kid was there, still standing where I'd first seen him. Same spot on the shoulder. Still facing the median, head tilted just slightly like he was listening to something. Pajama fabric looked thin in my tail lights, fluttering the slightest bit. I popped the trailer brakes by habit, left the truck brakes alone in case I needed to move fast. Habit and training both told me not to get out. Every safety video about roadside stops, every story about robberies, every don't play hero speech. But there's a line in your head when it comes to a barefoot kid on the side of NM 375 at midnight. I cracked the driver's door and climbed down, boots tasting the gravel, desert air sliding under my jacket. It smelled like dust and creosote and old heat, still radiating from the ground. "Hey, buddy," I called, staying near the steps. My voice sounded too loud in the empty space. "You lost? You okay?" The kid turned his head toward me, only his head. His body stayed fixed toward the median, shoulders and chest unmoving, feet planted in the gravel. The head rotated slow and smooth, like it was on a different axis than the rest of him. Neck didn't twist, didn't bend. It just turned, face swinging around 90 degrees until he was looking at me. The expression on his face didn't change. His eyes were wide and glassy, focused past me somewhere over my shoulder. Mouth relaxed, no smile, no frown. It was the kind of blank kids wear when they're half asleep in the back seat on a night drive. But the head, the way it had moved, made that sleepy expression look wrong. Like a mask someone had forgotten to animate. Every instinct told me to get back in the truck. Instead, I took one step down, boots crunching the gravel. "You hurt?" I asked softer now. "You need help?" The boy slowly lifted his right arm. It came up stiff, elbow locked until the last second, then bent just enough to extend his hand. He didn't wave. He pointed, past me toward the back of my trailer. I glanced over my shoulder. The red glow of my four-ways lit the pavement and a whole lot of nothing. Empty highway stretching back into the dark. White lines, soft glint of the rumble strip, the pale smear of desert beyond. No cars, no headlights, no people. I turned back to him. He was closer. He hadn't walked. I didn't hear gravel shift, didn't hear the scuff of bare feet. But now he stood at the base of my steps, maybe 2 feet from the bottom one. Same pajamas, same bare feet, head still tilted at that slight angle, face still wearing that frozen, unfocused expression. His arm was still up, hand still pointing past me, fingertip aimed somewhere behind the trailer. I hadn't looked away long enough for him to cover that distance on foot. The air around my knees felt suddenly colder. The hair on the back of my neck prickled, sweat starting to bead under my shirt despite the desert chill. Up close, I could see details I hadn't before. Dirt on his toes, packed in the creases. The pajama fabric around his cuffs looked worn, thinned white like it had been washed 100 times. A tiny stitched rocket ship on his chest pocket, loose thread hanging. His eyes were wrong, not in color or shape, in focus. They didn't track me, didn't jump at movement. They were fixed on some point just over my shoulder, like I wasn't really what he was seeing. "Where are your parents?" I asked, throat dry. "You from a car? A house?" Nothing. Not a blink. His chest didn't move. No rise, no fall. The desert wind should have hit him the same as it hit me, but his hair didn't stir. His pointing hand twitched. Not a full movement, just a little jerk, like a needle on a cheap fuel gauge. "Behind you." I stepped backward onto the bottom step without thinking, boot heel hunting for steel. My fingers found the grab handle. I twisted, peered down the length of my rig, glanced toward the shadow under the trailer, the dim reflection of my hazard flashes on the asphalt. Nothing, just my own truck breathing hot air at the night. When I turned back, he was on the middle step. Same distance from my face as before, same height difference. But now we were eye level, his small frame occupying the space my boot had been in a second earlier. I hadn't felt him brush me, hadn't heard metal ring with his weight. He was just there, like he'd been edited into the scene between frames. We were close enough now that if he'd leaned forward, his forehead would have touched my chest. His finger was still extended past my shoulder, still pointing at nothing, still expressionless. From somewhere far off, a train horn blew, long and low, sound bending in the desert air. It snapped something in me loose. I climbed. Didn't run, didn't scramble, just moved with purpose, hand over hand up the grab rail, boots up the steps, body turned sideways so I wouldn't have to brush against him. The temperature dropped another 5 degrees as my shoulder passed inches from his. The cold felt like walking through a freezer door threshold. I slammed the driver's door, heart hammering, breath loud in the cab. My hands went to the locks by reflex, even though I knew a kid that could teleport up steel steps probably wasn't checking door latches. The inside of the cab felt too hot now. The dash lights glowed soft amber. The CB hissed quietly, a hush overlaid with a faint whisper that might have been just the ground noise, might have been something else. I checked the passenger window. The boy was standing on the ground next to the steps, exactly where I'd first seen him up close. Staring at the side of the cab now, eyes still unfocused. The elevation change, the vanish and reappear meant nothing to him. His finger stayed up, pointing behind my truck. My hand shook as I shoved the shifter into gear and rolled. Slow at first, then faster as the tires found the lane, as the nose of the Pete angled back toward center. I watched him in the mirror until the last second. He didn't chase. He didn't wave. He didn't fade out like a movie ghost. He just stood there, shoulder at my steps, arm extended, head canted, eyes locked on some invisible point behind my trailer. In the mirror, he stayed. For a quarter mile, a half mile, the geometry went wrong. At that distance, a small kid in pajamas should have been swallowed by the dark. Instead, every time I glanced at the mirror, he was framed perfectly in the red flash of my hazards. Same size, same clarity, as if my truck wasn't moving and the road was. Finally, somewhere around mile marker 14, he dropped out of sight. Not like he fell, like someone closed a curtain. The CB crackled once, a single sharp pop, then went quiet. I didn't stop again until the highway met the busier route north and the hidden highway was behind me. Even then, at the next fuel, my hands shook enough that it took 2 tries to get the nozzle seated. Later that week, sitting in a diner near Las Cruces, I told a sheriff's deputy I knew a cleaned-up version of it. Left out the teleporting. Kept the barefoot kid on the shoulder. He listened, coffee cooling in his hand. When I got to mile marker 13, he nodded once, slowly. In '98, he said, family van got hit out there. Drunk in a pickup crossed the line. Rolled him. 2 kids inside. Brothers. They recovered 1 body. Other boy got thrown. He jerked his chin toward the window, toward the vague direction of the highway. Desert took him. Coyotes, heat. They never found him. Father used to leave toys by that marker. Stopped coming around after a few years. He finished his coffee and stood. You're not the first driver to talk about seeing a kid out there, he added. Won't be the last. They usually say he's pointing at something behind them. Behind what? I asked. He shrugged. Maybe where the van landed. Maybe where he landed. Maybe just behind. I've run NM 375 twice since that night. Both times I made sure I wasn't anywhere near mile 13 at midnight. I don't look for the marker. I watch the range of my headlights and the sweep of my gauges and pretend the numbers on the poles are random. But sometimes, when the desert's too quiet and the white lines blur, I feel the urge to check my mirrors. Not for cops, not for tailgaters. For a small figure on the shoulder, arm outstretched. And I know that if I ever see him again, I won't stop. Because I'm pretty sure he's not pointing at the road, or the median, or my trailer. I think he's trying to show me where they finally found the other boy, and why he's still out there, waiting. I've been running the Sierra long enough to know the difference between bad weather and a bad feeling. Name's Royce. I pull a 2016 Kenworth T680 53-foot dry van, mostly produce and dry goods between Sacramento and the Reno/Sparks area. Donner Pass is my regular climb, eastbound up out of Auburn, westbound back down with the engine brakes singing. I've seen it in all moods. Black ice, whiteouts, summer RV parades. You give it respect and usually it lets you through. This was January. Late run. I was westbound, coming off the Nevada side after dropping in Sparks, headed back toward the valley empty. Trailer was a light load of pallets and packaging, maybe 15,000 gross on the box. Empty enough that I had to watch my brakes. Easy enough that the Kenworth felt spry on the grades. It was just after midnight when I crossed the summit. Outside temp read 19 degrees Fahrenheit, but the kind of 19 that cuts sharper with the wind off those ridges. Snowbanks stacked along the guardrails, pushed high and crusted with plow scars. Caltrans signs had lifted chain control a couple hours earlier, but the road still wore that packed, polished sheen. 2 dark tracks where tires had rubbed the snow smooth, center and shoulders lighter. Sky was low and dirty, clouds hiding any stars. My headlights chewed up flakes every now and then, those light flurries that look like you're flying through static. The cab was warm, almost too warm, heater blown down on my boots, defrost on low. Wind noise around the mirrors mixed with the low whine of the engine brake as I eased into the descent. CB was on 19. Sparse traffic that time of night. A couple eastbounds calling out chain spots. One guy complaining about slipping off a dock in Reno. Farther down the mountain, you usually hear more locals, snowplows, CHP. Up around the top, it gets quiet. I just passed the runaway ramp sign when I saw them. 3 sets of taillights ahead, stacked in a neat line, floating red in the dark. They were maybe a half-mile down the grade, running slower than the traffic flow. With the curves and the trees, you normally catch glimpses of rigs and pieces, lights here, a reflection there. But this was clean, 3 trucks, same spacing, same speed. I closed the gap gradually, staying in the right lane, engine brake on medium. As my beams started to paint their outlines, details sharpened. All 3 were the same. Same tractor profile, boxy conventional cabs, dark, no obvious chrome, no company decals. Could have been old Freightliners or Volvos, hard to tell at that distance, but what stood out were the trailers. Matte gray boxes, straight 53s, no logos, no how's my driving, no scuff marks where vinyl had been peeled off, just flat, dull paint that ate my headlights. I eased closer enough to read sidewalls. No DOT numbers on the tractors. No MC or USDOT lettering on the doors. No trailer plates on the rear doors. The spot where the plate bracket should have been on the rear frame was just blank. No state inspection stickers. No reflectivity tape pattern I recognized. Even the ICC bumpers looked a little too clean, steel dark and uniform. Unmarked equipment happens sometimes, new units, private fleets, but 3 identical rigs back to back, creeping down Donner at 10 under the limit in the dead of night. That'll catch your attention. I backed off, gave them room, kept a couple 100 yards between my bumper and the last trailer. Enough space that if something went sideways on that grade, I wouldn't be part of their pile. Brake lights glowed on the lead truck as they hit one of the steeper sections. The second truck's lights came on a second later, then the third's. Normal enough telephone braking. I let the engine brake do its work, RPM climbing a hair, that familiar deep chatter through the frame. Then the last truck's brake lights started to pulse. Not flicker. Not the rough on-off you get with a bad connection or someone riding the pedal. This was a rhythm. 3 short, 1 long pause. 3 short, 1 long pause. Perfectly even intervals. My first thought was faulty module. Then I noticed the middle truck's lights glowing steady. So were the leads. Only the last was pulsing, in a pattern that felt deliberate. 3-1. 3-1. CB hissed softly. I wasn't expecting anyone to say anything. So when the whisper slid through the static, it crawled right under my skin. Stay with the line. The voice was faint but clear enough to pick out the words. No breaker, no handle, no location. Just those 4 syllables, stretched and breathy, hollow like someone speaking through a ventilation duct. I thumbed the mic, westbound 80, Donner side, 3 unmarked gray boxes. One of you having light issues? You got a copy. Silence. Then the static thinned almost to nothing, like the channel was holding its breath. No reply, no bleed from other channels. Just the engine noise and the tire hum and the low whine of the engine brake in my own cab. Ahead, all 3 sets of taillights brightened as they slowed more. The grade wasn't that bad here. No reason to drop below 40. Still, their speed bled off down into the low 30s. The gap started to close even with me coasting, so I eased a little harder on the brake, feeling the air system respond, watching my pressure needles like a hawk. The last truck's brake lights kept pulsing. 3 on, off, 1 on, off. The red glare painted the snowbanks and the bare branches in waves. Stay with the line. The whisper came again, barely louder than my own breath. It didn't sound like it was coming from the speaker this time, more like it was hovering somewhere between the CB and the windshield. I told myself I was tired, that I was hearing patterns in noise because I'd been awake since noon, that there was a perfectly reasonable explanation for 3 anonymous rigs rolling slow and quiet down a mountain. Then the lead truck turned. We were coming up on a notch in the grade where a maintenance access cuts off to the right. I've passed it 100 times. A narrow gate, usually closed, chain and padlock, Caltrans only stenciled on the sign. No overhead lights, just a dark bite in the snowbank. That night, the gate was open. No flashers, no plow truck, no sign truck. Just an empty mouth of asphalt cleared of snow, cutting away from the main line into the trees. Without a turn signal, without any change in speed, the lead matte gray truck veered right and took it. No hesitation, no brake check. It left the interstate as smoothly as if it had been following that path all along. The second truck followed. A simple, precise lane change, straight into the dark of the access road. No adjustment for grade, no wobble, no roll. Just a smooth peel off the main highway, red lights shrinking between black pines. The last truck slowed almost to a crawl. Its brake lights glowed steady now, red and full, reflecting off the snow like a flare. It took the turns slower than the others, nose angling into the access, trailer cutting the corner, tires hissing on packed snow. Then it stopped, half its length still on the interstate shoulder, half tucked into the forbidden lane. I dropped to 25, easing past in the left lane, conscious of the weight, the grade, the limited friction. My eyes wanted to crawl over every inch of that rig, catalog every wrong detail. My survival instincts wanted me looking straight ahead. The trailer's rear doors were featureless gray. No hinges visible, no locking bars, just faint lines where the seams would be. As I drew level with it, a sharp crack of metal on metal made the hair on my arms stand up. A seam appeared between the doors. A thin, black line. Slowly, with no visible mechanism, the left door slid open a few inches. Cold rolled out. Not the night air I'd been breathing. Not the dry mountain chill that seeps through window seals. This was deeper, heavier. A wave of cold so sharp it made my eyes water and my teeth ache. It poured into my cab through vents I knew were on recirc. It wrapped around my boots like fog. The heater might as well have been off. My breath plume thickened, hanging white in the glow of the dash. The windshield fogged at the edges. The heater fan picked up its pitch, struggling, but the cold pressed in anyway, like it had weight. As my headlights speared that narrow opening in the doors, I saw inside. Not pallets, not shrink-wrapped boxes, not loose freight, rows of shapes, standing. They were packed in upright, shoulder to shoulder, from floor to ceiling, like rows of mannequins in the dark. No straps, no load bars, no dunnage. Just vertical figures, motionless. Their outlines were wrong for cargo, slight curve of shoulders, slope of heads, narrowness of what should be legs. They didn't sway with the truck's slight movement. They were too still. My beams caught a hint of something pale where faces would be. Not reflective like tape, more like frost on skin. No eyes I could clearly make out, but the impression that if I looked long enough, the darkness between them would look back. The cold intensified as I drew even with the doors, like driving past an open freezer on a hot dock. Except the outside temp was still flashing 19 degrees Fahrenheit, and this felt colder than anything the mountain could throw at me. The CB crackled one last time. The whisper was clear now, right in my ear. Stay with the line. As the nose of my Kenworth cleared the rear of that trailer, my fight or flight finally picked a side. I rolled back into the throttle, firm but controlled, letting the engine pull me away. The cab shook as the speed climbed back into the 30s, then 40s. The cold receded a fraction, hanging at my back like a shadow. In the mirror, I saw the gray trailer sitting half in, half out of the access road. The doors slid shut, the seam healing over like a cut. The brake lights went dark. Then there was nothing but the wet black ribbon of I-80 behind me, a curve of guardrail, and the suggestion of trees. At the next open scale, down near the valley line, CHP had their lights on. I rolled across the platform, green arrow blinking me through. Curiosity, or something more like desperation, made me pull into the inspection lot and set the brakes. Inside, in the harsh fluorescent light of a concrete box, I asked the officer on duty a simple question. "You got 3 unmarked gray vans in front of me tonight? No plates." He frowned, tapped at his keyboard, eyes on the screen. "Only trucks through here last hour are you, a flatbed out of Reno, and a tanker. Nobody else got pinged on the readers. What about Caltrans access near mile marker?" I mentally traced the grade. "Near that maintenance gate before the second runaway ramp? Closed at 2000 hours," he said. "Gates locked. Nobody authorized up there tonight." "Why?" I didn't answer, just thanked him, signed where he pointed, and walked back out into the night. I ran Donner for years before that, and I've run it plenty since. I still see convoys. I still see unmarked boxes now and then. Lease fleets, private carriers, nothing unusual. But I give a wide berth to any set of taillights that look too identical, too disciplined, rolling a little too slow in the dead hours. And if I ever see 3 matte gray trailers in a neat line again, heading for a gate that shouldn't be open, I won't be anywhere near their line to find out what cargo they're carrying. I already got a look once. That was enough. I'm used to leaving the weird stuff out on the interstate. Name's Cole. I run a 2014 Freightliner Cascadia, 53-foot dry van, line haul out of a distribution center on the edge of Kansas City. Nights are my usual. I live about 20 minutes from the yard in a little dead-end subdivision. Cookie-cutter houses, cul-de-sac, kids' bikes left in driveways. It's the kind of place where people wave when you back your rig down the street and complain about engine noise if you idle too long. I've seen a lot in 15 years out there. Black ice, wrecks, idiots cutting under my bumper, strange lights in the distance. You learn to put the truck in park, go inside, and let the highway stay where it belongs. That night, it followed me home. I was coming back from a short hop. KC up to St. Joe and back, pallets of mixed grocery. Easy money, light traffic. Dispatch let me keep the tractor at my place between runs if I had a gap the next day, so long as I was hooked to an empty and didn't block the street. It was a Tuesday rolling into Wednesday, clear and cold, around 1 in the morning. I dropped my loaded trailer at the yard, hooked to an empty, did my post-trip, and rolled out bobtail plus empty toward home. No radio on, just the CB set to 19, low volume, that comforting hiss. The cab smelled like stale coffee, fast food wrappers in the trash bag on the floor, a faint hint of diesel in my clothes. Highway was dead. I took 29 south, then cut east on the loop. Outside temp sat at 43 degrees Fahrenheit. Pavement was dry. Sodium lights washed the asphalt in that dirty orange. My headlights stretched ahead in 2 solid tunnels. The engine hummed steady at 65, while vibrating just enough to remind me I was moving. First time I noticed the truck was when I checked my driver's side mirror out of habit. Pair of headlights way back. Not pinpricks, bigger, truck height, floating above the concrete barrier in the far lane. No glare pattern like a car. Not close enough to make me nervous, not far enough to ignore. Okay, another night driver. Nothing special. I took my exit toward the state highway that fed my town. The ramp curved right. My turn signal clicked, engine brake muttering as I eased down. In the mirror, the headlights followed, taking the same exit, smooth and unhurried. I rolled through the light at the bottom of the ramp, green in my favor, and merged onto the 2-lane. The city glow dropped behind me fast. Out here it was darker. Fields, tree lines, the occasional farmhouse light in the distance. My own headlights became the main event, carving a narrow world out of the black. The truck behind stayed. Every mirror check, same distance. A couple 100 yards back. Never creeping up, never dropping away. Just there, steady, patient. No other vehicles on the road. I tapped the brakes once, enough to drop 5 miles an hour and kick my brake lights on. The headlights in the mirror dipped with me. The gap stayed the same. I nudged the throttle, brought myself back up to 65. The following lights crawled up a bit, then settled back into that exact same pocket of space. No weaving, no high beams, no signs of impatience. Just a presence sitting in the dark behind my trailer. I thumbed the CB mic, southbound on 7. Truck hanging off my back door. You got a copy? Nothing. Just the low wash of static. I waited 30 seconds, tried again. Come on, driver. If you're gonna follow me this pretty, at least say hello. Silence. The speaker hissed gently. Underneath, if I really strained my ears, there was something that might have been breathing, might have been ground noise. It made the skin between my shoulder blades itch. I told myself it was probably a guy like me, dead tired, zoned out, happy to let my tail lights pull him along. Maybe his CB was off, maybe he didn't feel like talking. I turned off the state highway 10 minutes later, taking the smaller county road toward my town. The intersection was controlled by a lone stoplight stuck on blinking yellow at this hour. I slowed, checked both ways, nothing but darkness. As I cleared the turn, I checked my mirror. Headlights turned with me. Same speed, same distance. No hesitation at the light. County road got narrower, dipped and rose with the land. Trees crowded closer, branches overhead making a tunnel in my high beams. Patches of fog sat in the low spots, barely thick enough to notice. Houses started popping up, driveways disappearing into dark, mailboxes flashing reflective numbers in the beams. The truck behind me stayed perfectly placed. I ran through scenarios. Maybe he lived in the same town. Maybe he was taking the same cutoff to avoid scales in the morning. Maybe I was making drama out of night shift coincidence. Except every time I made a turn, he made it too. Left at the four-way into the edge of town. Slow roll past the closed gas station. Its canopy lights off, pumps dark. Past the 24-hour convenience store with one lonely car in the lot. Past the blinking crosswalk sign near the elementary school. All the familiar landmarks of my home stretch. Behind me, headlights, not gaining, not falling, just pinning me in their little circle. By the time I turned into my subdivision, the knot in my gut had tightened into something solid. Neighborhood was pure middle America. 2-story houses, vinyl siding, attached garages. Streetlights at the corners, casting cones of light on dead lawns and parked cars. Every window dark, every driveway quiet. It was 1:30 in the morning. Everyone who wasn't working nights was deep asleep. I eased my empty into the entrance. Flashers on out of courtesy. Wide swing so I didn't clip the decorative rock. The truck behind me followed, turn signal blinking, big grill gliding under the subdivision sign. No plates I could see in the mirror. No company name catching the light. I backed off the throttle, letting my speed drop to a crawl. The truck did the same. The distance between us stayed exact, too exact. My house sat at the far end of the cul-de-sac. Last one on the right. I always backed the trailer along the curb leading into it, nose angled so I could leave in the morning without waking the whole block. Tonight, though, there was already something big and dark about halfway down the circle. Another semi, parked dead center in the cul-de-sac, nose pointed toward my house. For a second, my brain misfired. I thought the truck behind me had somehow beaten me there. But in the mirrors, those headlights still burned steady behind my trailer, moving with me. The rig in the cul-de-sac had its lights off, just a looming shape against the faint glow of the neighborhood sky. I rolled to a stop at the mouth of the circle, hazards clicking, engine idling low. In front of me, an unmarked semi parked where kids ride their bikes in daylight. Behind me, another, waiting. My porch light was on. I keep it on when I'm out, motion sensor set to trip if anyone walks near the door. I cast a pale cone over the front steps, over the little crack in the concrete I keep meaning to fix. I sat for a moment, hands on the wheel, listening. The truck behind idled. A faint rumble just on the edge of hearing, more like memory than sound. The truck in the circle didn't. It sat in total silence. No exhaust plumes in the cold night air. No vibration in the pavement. Just the shape of a cab and trailer blocking out the houses behind it. My own engine ticked quietly, fan cycling. I decided I was done being the guy hovering in the street. I pulled the rig as tight as I could along the curb, lights still on, and set the brakes. The air dumped with a sigh, loud in the still neighborhood. I sat there another beat, feeling watched from two directions. Then I climbed down. Gravel from my side flower bed crunched under my boots as I crossed my small front yard. The air smelled like wet leaves and exhaust. My breath fogged in front of me. The hairs on my arms lifted under my jacket. I didn't look at the truck behind me. I didn't look at the one in the cul-de-sac. I focused on the door, key in my hand, porch light dim buzzing above my head. Inside, the house felt wrong in that way it does after a long night. Too quiet, too still. I grabbed the aluminum bat I keep by the coat rack. Habit from old days in rougher neighborhoods. Tonight it felt good to have something solid in my grip. Through the front window I could see both trucks now. One at the end of the cul-de-sac, one by the entrance, framing my house like bookends. The one at the end of the circle had lit up while I was inside. Headlights burned low, casting white pools onto the asphalt. Clearance markers glowed on the top corners. No driver silhouette in the cab. No movement behind the windshield. The engine sounded wrong. Too smooth, too steady. A low rumble that didn't rise or fall. No fan cycling, no harmonic from the turbo, just a flat mechanical purr. The kind of sound you'd expect if someone recorded a truck idling and looped it. I stepped out onto the porch, bat in hand. Porch boards creaked under my weight. The light above me flickered once, then steadied. "Hey!" I called, voice low but sharp. I felt stupid, like I was about to yell at a parked car for existing. "You can't park here, man. This is a cul-de-sac. People gotta get out in the morning." No response. The engine kept its weird, even rumble. I walked down the driveway slowly, bat hanging loose at my side. The asphalt was cold through the soles of my boots. Somewhere a dog barked once, then shut up. Up close, the truck in the circle looked like a dozen fleet trucks I'd passed that night, white cab, white box trailer. But there were no visible markings. No DOT numbers, no unit number on the bumper, no company name on the door. The plate bracket on the front bumper was empty. The wheels were clean, too clean. No road grime up on the tanks or the sides. The cab windows were dark. I stepped closer, set my free hand on the edge of the fender to steady myself, and leaned up to look inside. Empty. No jacket on the seat. No lunchbox on the doghouse. No logbook on the dash. Keys hung in the ignition, a cheap plastic tag dangling from the ring. The engine idled at 800 RPM, needle steady. The temperature gauge sat low, too low. After hours of running, even in cold night air, there should have been some heat in the block. This needle hovered just above dead, like someone had cranked it 5 minutes ago. I laid my palm flat against the side of the hood. It was cold. Not engine just shut off warm. Not sat outside all day cool. Refrigerated cold. Like touching metal out of a freezer. Frost traced faint spiderwebs along the edge near the grill, catching the porch light. Behind me, up at the house, my porch light flickered again. Off, on, off, on. The bat felt suddenly heavier in my hand. Inside the strange truck's cab, the CB crackled to life. Speaker popped once, sharp in the still night. A wash of static rolled out of the open driver's window, though I hadn't seen it open. Underneath the static was a sound like someone dragging air through a long metal tube. Then a voice. Calm. Flat. Too close. Get back in your house. Not a shout. Not panicked. Just a simple instruction. The words seemed to come from everywhere. The cab, my own truck behind me, the air above the cul-de-sac. It sounded a little like me. Not exactly, but enough to make my skin crawl. I took a step back. The engine cut off mid-idle. No key turn. No dying sputter. Just on then off. The needles on the dash fell limp. The headlights snapped dark. Marker lights blinked out. The sudden silence rang in my ears. My porch light steadied. Stayed on. I stood there in the dark street, bat in hand, heart pounding. every neighbor's house looking back with blind windows. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then I listened to the quiet and did the smartest thing I've ever done in my life. I got back in my house, locked the door, checked the back door, sat in the living room with the TV on mute and the bat across my lap, listening for Diesel. Somewhere around 3, I must have dozed off. Morning light coming through the blinds woke me around 7. Birds outside. A lawn mower 2 streets over. Ordinary noises. The bat was on the coffee table. My heart rate was normal. The night felt like something I dreamed on a long haul, until I stepped outside. My truck sat where I'd left it along the curb, dew on the windshield, exhaust stack faintly rust-streaked in the soft light. No other semi in sight. Cul-de-sac empty, just trash cans and cars backed into driveways. On the pavement in front of my house, though, the evidence was there. Tire marks. Deep, dark arcs worn into the asphalt. Overlapping circles like someone had spent the night driving around and around the cul-de-sac. Perfect loops, some tight near my driveway, some wide enough to kiss the far curb. No gravel displaced, no skid marks, just rubber worn into the surface. I walked the pattern, swallowing hard. The tracks started at the entrance to the circle and never left. No straight line back to the main street. No indication of where the truck had gone when it disappeared. My neighbor across the way, old guy with a robe too thin for the weather, shuffled out to get his paper. He nodded at me. "Big truck out here late last night," he said. "Figured it was you, doing laps." "Wasn't me," I said. He grunted, unconvinced, and went back inside. I stood in the center of those looping tire marks, listening to the faint hum of my still warm house behind me, the normal morning sounds, and the distant memory of that flat voice over the CB. "Get back in your house." Sometimes I wonder if that was a threat or a warning. Whether whatever was driving or not driving, that rig wanted me safe inside or just wanted me penned up where it knew I'd be. I still park my truck at home between runs. I still run nights. But on the rare occasions when I pull into the subdivision after midnight and catch a pair of headlights too steady in my mirror, I don't linger in the street. I do what the voice told me. I get back in my house, and I let the highway figure out on its own how it plans to follow me. I run nights because I like the feeling of being the only set of headlights on 100 miles of road. Name's Avery. I pull a 2019 Cascadia, 53-foot dry van, for a mid-sized outfit out of Salt Lake. I've got 12 years on the logbooks, most of them on I-80 between Utah and California. I know where the grades start to bite, where the troopers sit dark, and where the pavement sings different under your steers. I also know the stretch near Elko well enough that I shouldn't have been as tired as I was that night. It was late October. I'd loaded in Salt Lake that afternoon, household goods, light but bulky, and headed west. Dispatch wanted the trailer staged in Reno for a morning live unload, which meant my clock and their window lined up best if I split my night in the middle. I do 20-minute nap intervals sometimes, never too deep, just enough to reset my head when the white lines blur. By the time I rolled past Elko, it was 12:40 a.m. according to the dash. Outside temp read 48 degrees Fahrenheit, clear sky overhead, stars somewhere above the sodium glare. The road was dry, air crisp, that desert smell of dust and cold sagebrush coming through the vents. Traffic was thin. A couple westbounds ahead, 1 or 2 eastbounds sliding by now and then. CB on 19, volume low. Nothing but hash and the occasional distant voice I couldn't catch clean. I felt that familiar eyelid drag, the weight behind your eyes that coffee stops touching. I could still do the miles, but I've seen too many guys push past that feeling and never make the next exit. I've put chains on in the dark. I've drifted on black ice. None of that scares me as much as the moment your brain nods while your hands still think they're driving. There's a small rest area west of Elko I use sometimes. Nothing fancy. 2 concrete bathrooms, a handful of truck slots, a couple of picnic tables half buried in gravel. I saw its blue sign in my high beams. Rest area 2 miles. Then the drowsy drivers take a break sign that might as well have had my name on it. I swung in. The ramp curved off to the right, rumble strips buzzing under my steers. The parking area opened up, lit by a few tall poles washed in yellow sodium light. 3 trucks were already there, curtains drawn. One reefer humming away, another dark, an old cab over I'd seen a few times before. I found a slot near the end, lined my trailer with the faded white lines, and set the brakes. Air dumped with that long, tired sigh. I let the engine idle at a low rumble. The cab felt suddenly small, warm, full of my own breath and the lingering smell of cheap coffee and plastic food wrappers. I checked the time. 12:49 a.m. "I'll give you 20, I told myself. Just 20. Alarm on. Doors locked. I did exactly what I always do. Slid the seat back, killed the headlights, left the marker lights on. I hit the power door locks and heard that satisfying double thunk. Battery-powered dash cam glowed red, still recording. CB hissed in the background, steady as a heartbeat. I pulled the thick black curtain that separates the cab from the sleeper, just halfway, and crawled back. The sleeper was my usual chaos. Blanket half folded, pillow pushed against the back wall, a sweatshirt balled up in the corner. The mattress still held the day's warmth. The air smelled like detergent and, faint under that, the cold refrigerant breath of the HVAC unit in the wall. I lay down on my side facing the cab, shoes off but clothes still on. Habit. You don't strip down for a 20. I set the timer on my phone for 19 minutes, just shy of a full crash, and tossed it above my head. The truck rocked once as a gust of wind hit the side, then settled. The engine's low idle vibrated through the mattress, a constant hum under my ribs. My breathing slowed to match it. Somewhere outside, a reefer cycled on. Air brakes from another rig side. The rest area settled into that late-night rhythm, machines breathing, humans trying to. I let my eyes close. Sleep didn't fully take me. It never does on those micronaps. It's more like floating just under the surface. I was aware of my own weight on the mattress, aware of the faint glow seeping around the edges of the curtain from the dash lights, of the distant white noise of the CB. My thoughts thinned out into images of highway miles and loading docks and headlights. Something shifted behind me. It was small at first, the kind of movement you'd chalk up to the truck settling on its suspension, or a gust nudging the trailer. The mattress dipped a fraction near my lower back, a subtle change in pressure. The blanket tugged down half an inch toward the wall. I half-registered it and told myself it was just me shifting my weight. The engine's idle beat on. My breathing stayed slow. Then the mattress dipped again. This time lower, firmer, like someone was climbing onto it behind me, putting a knee down carefully. Then another. The warmth along my back changed. The air that had been empty suddenly felt occupied, like there was less space between my spine and the wall. The blanket stretched tighter over me, not from above, but from behind, as if shared. Every muscle in my body went rigid. The cab was locked. I knew that with the kind of certainty you don't question. I'd heard the locks. I'd shut the doors myself. The only way into my sleeper was through those 2 doors and the thick glass I was now facing away from. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Closed behind me, so close I could feel the shift of air. Something settled fully onto the mattress. The springs creaked, soft, strained. A body-sized weight, curling into the bunk in the narrow strip of space left behind me. I could feel it without touch. That awareness you get when someone stands too close in a hallway. The blanket pulled tight against my back, then loosened, like it had been draped over both of us now. I forced my eyes open. From where I lay, all I could see was the faint line of the curtain edge, the soft orange glow of a couple of LEDs from the CB and dash beyond it. The rest was darkness. I didn't dare move more than a fraction. Every instinct screamed that turning around to look was the worst idea I'd ever have. Behind me, the presence curled. The mattress compressed in a slow, deliberate roll. I felt, not physically, but in that deep, animal part of my brain. Knees drawing up, a spine curving, someone fitting themselves into the shape of my body, back to back. A breath brushed the back of my neck. It wasn't warm or cold. It was the absence of both. A moving emptiness that made the tiny hairs at my nape stand straight. A voice whispered, inches from my ear, "Don't get up." The words were soft, almost gentle, with a roughness underneath. A man's voice, mid-range. Not familiar, but not completely foreign either. It sounded like it had been pulled through too many miles of bad CB signal. Flattened, thinned. Something in me broke loose. Safety videos, training, years of experience. All of it drowned under a flood of raw panic. I exploded forward. I kicked off hard, every muscle firing. The mattress bucked backward, springs shrieking in protest. I didn't look. I scrambled on hands and knees toward the slit in the curtain, shoulder slamming into the wall, elbow cracking against the edge of the bunk. The curtain fought me for a second, then gave, rings scraping hard along the rail. I tumbled through into the cab, half falling onto the driver's seat, bathed suddenly in the glow of my own dash lights. My hand hit the key, slamming it all the way over even though the engine was already idling. I dropped the brakes with a yank, transmission clunking as I shoved it into gear without finesse. The truck lurched forward, tires grinding against the concrete curb as I corrected. In the mirror, the rest area parking lot smeared past. Poles, bathrooms, the vague shapes of sleeping trucks. My trailer swung out, then back in line. The engine groaned as I poured power into it. Behind me, the rear curtain thrashed. It snapped side to side, rod rattling, fabric billowing like someone had kicked out hard against it from the sleeper side. The hooks popped free one by one, plastic pinging off the dash and floor. I kept my eyes on the windshield. The ramp appeared ahead, white lines guiding me back onto I-80. My hands shook on the wheel. My foot was heavy on the accelerator, but some part of my brain still knew enough to bring it up to speed gradually. The last thing I needed was to jackknife my own panic. The truck climbed out of the rest area and merged back into the westbound lane. The highway opened around me again, endless black and dashed white and the edge of my own beams. The curtain went still. I drove. For a long time, I did nothing else. No radio, no CB, no checking the sleeper. I focused on the numbers, RPM, speed, oil pressure, anything that made sense. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my teeth. About 45 minutes later, I saw a lit gas station at an exit. One of those combo truck stops with a fast food logo glowing over the canopy. I pulled in. The parking lot was mostly empty. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, throwing everything into harsh white. After the highway darkness, it felt almost obscene. I found a slot near the edge, set the brakes, and shut the engine off. The sudden silence made my ears ring. For a long minute, I just sat there, staring at the steering wheel, fingers still wrapped tight. Only when my palms started to cramp did I force them to let go. The sleeper curtain hung in tatters. Half the hooks were still on the rail, a few dangling empty. The fabric itself drooped crookedly, the bottom edge twisted. I reached back slowly and snapped on the sleeper light. The bunk was empty, blanket half twisted, pillow pushed into the corner. The usual mess. No one lying there. No gray jacket, no boots, no duffel bag. The air smelled wrong, though. Under the usual detergent and road sweat was a faint metallic tang, like cold pennies. I pressed my hand to the sheet. It was wet, not sweaty damp, not spilled water damp. Wet and cold to the touch, the kind of cold you get from something that's been outside on a winter night soaking up air and frost. The fabric clung to my skin when I lifted my hand away, fingertips tingling. I stood there in the harsh overhead light, listening to my own breathing and the faint hum of the fuel pumps outside, and felt the boundaries of what I knew stretched thin. I needed people, noise, anything that wasn't me and that bunk. Inside the station, the fluorescent glare hummed over racks of chips and windshield washer fluid. Coffee dispensers burbled in the corner. A TV over the seating area played some infomercial with the sound off. The clerk looked up as I came in. He was young, mid-20s, in a logo polo, name tag crooked. He did that little double take people do when they see a trucker who looks like he's seen something out past the dotted lines. "You the guy with the blue Freightliner?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded raw in my own ears. "Why?" He nodded toward the front doors, where my rig sat under the canopy lights. "You the one who picked up that hitchhiker back east? Guy in the gray jacket." My skin crawled. "What hitchhiker?" I said. He frowned, like I was messing with him. Tall guy, gray jacket, kinda stringy hair? Came in about an hour ago asking if any drivers were heading this way. Said some trucker let him ride from Elko and dropped him at the rest area, 'cause he was too tired to go on. He say what truck? I asked. The clerk shrugged. Just a Cascadia. I figured it was you. Not a lot of trucks came through between then and now. I turned and looked out the glass. My truck sat exactly where I'd left it. Marker lights dark now. Windshield reflecting the canopy glow. Sleeper invisible from this angle. I thought about the locked doors, the empty lot at Elko, the dip of the mattress, the voice in my ear telling me not to get up. I never stopped for anyone, I said quietly. The clerk opened his mouth, then shut it. Some part of him decided not to push. You, need coffee? He asked instead. Yeah, I said. Yeah, I do. I haven't done a 20-minute nap in a dark, empty rest area since that night. If I'm that tired, I park where there's light and noise, or I shut down for a proper 10. If I do lay down in the bunk, I check the locks twice and the sleeper 3 times, like that's gonna make a difference. Every now and then, running I-80 past Elko in the small hours, I see someone on the shoulder in my headlights. Jeans, gray jacket, thumb half out. I tell myself it's just another hitchhiker, flesh and blood, trying his luck. But I don't stop, because I don't know if he's trying to get into my truck or trying to get out.